This is episode 51 of Hitting for the Cycle. He's Ben Kruse. I'm Nick Morgasen. We're back for another week. Ryan's off handling some things, so I am here in the spot. Ben, you and I haven't had a chance to really do a lot of solo content, really more on the group content. So how you doing this week?
Doing good, Nick. We obviously we haven't done a show at all together on this platform, but might as well. We kind of figured it was going to happen at some point with some guys coming in and out. But this is our last show of the program, and I want to thank, the regular season specifically. I want to thank Tom. I want to thank, of course, my co-host for most of the season, Ryan, for making obviously this possible and having my first year do it. So. Really excited for this last overall episode. We're going to get a lot of stuff to you guys, and I can't wait.
And before we do all that, make sure you follow the show on social media, Hitting for the Cycle at HFTC, ETB on Twitter, Instagram, and other social media platforms. Make sure you follow the Empty the Bench Podcast Network at ETB Network on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at ETB Network. Make sure you follow our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ETB Network, as we slowly approach 900 subscribers and trying to get that track to 1,000. So please like and subscribe. And if you don't want to listen on the video side, you don't want to watch on the video side, you want to listen to Hitting for the Cycle wherever you get your podcasts.
And as always, folks, this episode is presented to you guys by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience, from playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule.
All right. We ready to go here?
Let's do it. All right. So the Mets and Braves, of course, kicked off their big week series coming up this week. There's, of course, a ton of playoff implications on the line for both teams. Obviously, both teams are currently right outside the wild card mix, and the first game got played between both sides this week. The Braves took it to the Mets, I think, by the final of 5 or 6-1. It was pretty much all Braves from the get-go. But one of the biggest concerns was about not just the game itself, but the rest of the series. And now specifically, we have this right here in which the Mets and Braves series, of course, was supposed to conclude tonight. And, of course, they postponed yesterday's game. It's completely postponed because of the massive hurricane that's down south. I want to just quickly send my prayers and thoughts to everybody that's deeply going through it, of course, down there. Definitely don't want to see that type of stuff. And just hopefully people are going to be safe than anything. But now we figure out specifically that this series is getting pushed to a day-night doubleheader on Monday. Nobody is specifically playing on Monday besides now these two teams. And, of course, Nick, this is, of course, the day right before we have the wild card starting. So, of course, there's been a massive amount of complaints, which, of course, is understood. There's a ton of stuff that's kind of figured out with this type of stuff because – you have teams getting affected as well. You have the Diamondbacks, of course, who are kind of fighting for the third wildcard spot. That, if they kind of, slip a bit, it's just now the fact of like this series, I'm not saying doesn't have as much implications, but now with it kind of getting pushed back and, people obviously the whole entire league, and we kind of talked about it real quick off the air before we came on, the league definitely screwed up with this whole entire plan. They definitely should have had a contingency plan before. I know a lot of leagues obviously have done a bunch of contingency plans in case of stuff like this for whatever reason happen. And, Rob Manfred and company they screwed up. They essentially just kind of put like a puzzle together and it just kind of is like, all right, here you go. Like that's that. And, you get what you get. Right. So it's just an awful situation. I mean, obviously understand, they got postponed because of a massive hurricane, but it was more of just the overall plan that they made in place. So I just want to quickly just get your overall thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think part of this has to do with everyone is pissed off about the timing. The timing is the big matter here. I mean, excuse me, we're coming up on the beginning of the playoffs. I mean, it also doesn't help if you look back over the years, we didn't have this many games. We didn't have an extension of the playoffs that we do now. So now they have to start sooner to get all the games in before the inevitable with the weather issues, with winter and everything coming up. But with hurricanes, we've seen contingency plans before where we move games to neutral sites. Heck, I remember Tampa. Didn't Tampa play games in Milwaukee, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, and I know Houston, I think, had that hurricane a couple years ago. They
I
got
think
moved
Houston went to
around.
Milwaukee
Yeah,
also.
yep,
So
yep.
we've
So
seen this done before where they should have moved the series. Like, forget the fact that the Braves were going to be out 2 home games and we were this is a whole castigation by Major League Baseball to say that we need the games and that we need the money. Like, stop.
mhm,
Like, you
yep.
don't. Like, this is Rob Manfred at its finest again trying to say, "Hey, I can't. We need this money. We're desperate, but we're going to put all our players at risk to play a game that's probably not as important. I understand it's important for the standings
Mhm,
sake and everything, but how about the protection of the players?
mhm,
How about the protection of the fans that are
yep.
stupidly going to try to get in and watch this game? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. It's just a complete overall type of disaster going on, and obviously the Manfred and company they're pretty much using it as a money grab, like you mentioned. So it's what it is at this point in time. Just looking at this article quick from ESPN. So obviously Carlos Mendoza, in terms of reacting to this, he said essentially that we got to move on to the next series now. We're facing another really good team in Milwaukee, who of course already clinched for a playoff spot. And not only to go out there and win a series, but you got to go out there and essentially take care of business because they're essentially looking at this and be like, we want to have the 2 games on Monday essentially count for something. Um, right now, the Mets are 87 and 70, and the Diamondbacks are 88 and 71. They're both tied in the wild card race, while the Braves are 86 and 71 with a full game back. So 2 of those teams, Nick, are going to be making the playoffs, which are going to be set to begin on Tuesday with the best of 3 wildcard round. So I understand specifically that they're going to try to make this work out and make it on Monday or whatever. But like you mentioned, it could have just obviously crisis averted. They should have definitely had something as a different plan in place, and it didn't have to come to this type of overall conclusion if it had to.
Right. I mean, again, Major League Baseball needs to do a better job of contingency plans and really play this out. They knew they could have looked at the weather forecast and they could have figured out how to do this the proper way. And they could have said, all right, we know there's a hurricane coming. Let's plan out 2, 3, or even a week in advance and say, hey, what stadiums are available that don't have games? I mean, we're also at the end of the season. So like, there should be a place or a plan that they could have done something to figure this out. But for some reason, they weren't able to figure it out.
Right. But at this point, they obviously have to figure out what's the best situation in that place. And, we can obviously talk about it. We can obviously speculate. We obviously can, um, it's what it is. So it really just is very unfortunate.
Yeah. All right, Ben, hold on one second. I got to run downstairs because my dad needs something. So just give me a second. I'm going to pause.
All right. And now, specifically, once we kind of go through this overall series, time will tell. What happens on Monday is going to be the massive factor on that. But now we're going to transit over to the Oakland Athletics. Of course, they are going to be playing their last ever game as an Oakland A's team at their ballpark today. But of course, their ownership, of course, has been heavily scrutinized for a long period of time. We actually had some fans last night in the sellout pretty much chanting "sell the team." They, of course, are showing their displeasure with a certain somebody, which we're going to get into right now, and that is John Fisher. He just put out a letter to the Bay Area and company. And I really just quickly wanted to kind of read off the letter to you guys. So essentially, he said, we proposed and pursued 5 different locations in the Bay Area. And despite mutually and ongoing efforts to get a deal done for the Howard Terminal project, we came up short. Though I wish I could speak to every one of you individually, I can tell you this from the heart, we tried. Staying in Oakland was our goal, it was our mission, and we failed to achieve it. And for that, I am generally sorry. And about those locations, 2 of the Bay locations weren't in Oakland, while they were in Laney College site, which was in Oakland. It was a quickly shot idea, and the team in the city made progress on the Howard Terminal site, but the A's made negotiations needlessly complicated and ultimately dashed from the table, making the Vegas situation pretty much straightforward from there. I don't really know what to make out of that. I think personally, A's fans for so long have deserved better. I think it would be, they're essentially going to a new place in Vegas, but of course there was a while proposed of them going to a AAA ballpark in Sacramento. That, of course, got shut down. That didn't happen. And, for a guy specifically writing this letter, honestly, I think it would have been better for him just not to say anything. The fans have been showing the displeasure for a long, long time. And now, essentially, you're just making this letter right at the end of the season where I think a lot of the fans are trying to stay in the moment. Funny enough, actually, one of my buddies from my other podcast network, he's an A's fan, and he worked for the stadium for a long, long time, and I actually spoke to him last night on the air, and he pretty much is like, this could be one of the toughest days of my life. And I'm thinking to myself, what could it possibly be? And he was wearing his A's jersey, and I told him, man, I said, you and a bunch of your fans, you guys deserve better. This is an overall team that has been out of park, specifically that's been really a football stadium, but you guys definitely come in and you come out, and the ownership has not cared one bit for so long. So I think
not one bit at all. Like, the stadium is a joke. The water, the big joke is don't drink the water inside the stadium. Like, and people are saying, like, even bottled water. I'm like, yeah, don't drink the water. Like, it's supposedly disgusting. You've seen the broadcast booth situation for the away team. Do you remember? I don't know if you and Ryan did it. Do you remember the story about the Mets coming in and the booth and the rats running through? Or I think it was a possum or something that ran through while they were doing the game? Because it's not a real booth.
Yeah. No, I think the Mets booth was just saying, like, every single time we've come to Oakland, it's something that's crazy.
It's makeshift.
Happens.
It's makeshift, essentially.
Yeah. So it just, the overall, I mean, you have obviously the massive foul territories, which is definitely something that you don't see often. I mean, obviously that kind of brought like an overall perk to the overall park, but all in all, you had the BART train situation. I mean, it kind of felt like you were walking across like a jail cell or something. Yeah. It was a bridge, but it was like a jail cell essentially when you're walking across it. Which, I mean, I've never been there. I never got the chance to be there, so I can't really have a dog in the fight of myself saying it, but just coming from far of like seeing it specifically, it doesn't feel like I missed much all in all. It just feels like specifically a massive stadium that there's obviously stuff to it, but it's just like a very worn down type of stadium. And for A's fans specifically, I'm sorry. And for Fisher specifically, publicly say this out loud. He probably wanted to make an overall statement, be like, hey, like, I made an effort, this and that. But like, at the end of the day, your fans have been getting on your ass for so long. And I think the last thing that A's fans want to hear is essentially yourself speaking a letter to the fans that we essentially tried, because theoretically you didn't try enough.
Speak up. No one cares that you wrote a letter that you probably didn't even write. Number one, you probably had some PR firm write this letter up, because like, you only read the important parts of the letter, but there's other parts where, because I have the full letter here, basically, this is the last series against the Rangers, their final home games, and our storied 57 years in Oakland, because people forget that they were in Philadelphia and Kansas City before they eventually settled in on Oakland. And they've had a 123-year history. But then they go into this whole thing. Well, they've won 4 World Series and 6 pennants and 17 divisions. Stop dwelling on the past. Okay? We get it. In the past, you've won titles. When's the last time they've won anything? Can you even remember? Can you remember the last time they've won anything?
Yeah, I don't even remember the last time theoretically they've been in the postseason. I mean, they've had countless last place finishes. They have, I mean, their fan base essentially is not even showing up to games anymore. I mean, at least for the last couple of years, it's just been, you can just get a ticket down the first base line for like $20. They just.
Unless it was the Yankees or the Mets or the Dodgers, if they were into town when everybody was going to be into, then no one cared.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if you had like a big market type of team that came in specifically to their park, maybe you can get a little bit out of revenue that way. And that's maybe why John Fisher is like, well, we obviously theoretically tried, but he's just like, we can make money from these big market teams coming in and at least getting the fans and stuff to come to the games. You essentially had a big massive sell the last couple of games because 1, your team is essentially moving, and 2, specifically, I think your fan base is essentially trying to make a message to you, right? So, I mean, they essentially are pretty much throwing every single type of message out there. The signs, of course, their overall, their message, their words, right? So they essentially they've had it.
I think it was last year. I don't know if you guys might have done it, but do you remember they showed on MLB.TV and they showed the difference between what was being shown on the signs were being shown on MLB.TV and what was being shown during their broadcasts? And they tried to block out the sell the A's signs. I don't know if you remember that story or not.
Yeah,
but
I heard about it. Mm-hmm.
But like, come on, now you're going to restrict what the fans are allowed to do. Like, and then I see the line that got me. I know. And that I know is what makes our departure so very hard. Is it, John? Is it Mr. Fisher? Is it really? Are you sad that your team is leaving Oakland? Because as soon as you heard the word Vegas, you and Rob Manfred, I can't forget, Rob Manfred has to take some of this blame too.
Yeah.
That there's the shiny toy in Vegas. I mean, the other scenario of this also, think about the Raiders who just left Oakland. So Oakland got screwed once already, losing a team to Vegas. Now Oakland's going to lose another team to Vegas at some point. And people are not even talking about the in-between time between now and Vegas, because who knows how. First of all, they don't technically have a stadium lease or deal yet in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to play in Sacramento, in a AAA stadium in Sacramento. Think about this. They're going to go play in a AAA stadium. They have to get this all approved by Major League Baseball because now they got to push the distances out for a Major League Baseball stadium. This is a mess.
Yeah. They have to go to essentially like the Blue Jays for a while. They had to play in Buffalo, Florida. In Buffalo. They had to play at a AAA park, and the dimensions and stuff. You can argue this and that, but it's it's different.
But I would say that's a different scenario though, because that was COVID.
Yeah.
But this is just nuts. Like, and they're just looking, because you mentioned the Howard Terminal project and all that stuff. Also, they could have had a stadium. John Fisher was not willing to spend the money properly needed. This guy was born with a silver spoon in his mouth into a billionaire family, and he's not willing to do what means necessary. And the only time you see him publicly is when he's begging for taxpayer money.
Yeah, he's not even caring about the team. He's caring about other stuff.
And the other thing, and the reason, part of the issue I will say that they had is the zoning rules, because they have the Giants 2 hours away. So every time they kept going for a stadium project, Major League Baseball and Rob Manfred kept saying, well, no, you're in the zoning law. You can't do that. Well, then how do you expect them to get a stadium?
Mm-hmm.
And didn't they have like that riverfront stadium that they were working on?
Yep.
And for some reason, it just fell apart.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Most of this I blame on John Fisher for not handling this properly.
I was thinking about this, Nick, and I obviously understand, like, kind of like with the Mets and the Yankees. Why didn't they not think more kind of about like them maybe playing right outside of San Francisco? Like specifically like right along like the waterfront line. Obviously the Giants have a pretty good overall setup there. Like Sacramento, AAA Park, or would you rather have like Bay Area right outside San Francisco? Of course, San Francisco has a ton of like, retail, restaurants, of course, a ton of just everything. And transportation wise, you still have like the BART system and stuff like that. So fans can still go over. San Francisco is only an hour away, and specific from Oakland, they definitely could have had a lot more fan revenue and just everything kind of put together. And you definitely, there's obviously no excuse to not say, oh, we couldn't have space, because you definitely could put a space, especially if it's like right along the waterfront somewhere. You definitely could have figured something out that way too.
I mean, for him to say, well, I don't even know if it's him saying this anymore, but I guess we have to say he said all this stuff in the letter. But for him to say staying in Oakland was our goal, was it? Was it your goal? Because if it was so bad that you wanted to stay in Oakland, you would have found a way. You're a billionaire. You have money. It's not like us average Joes who have to work 40 hours or more a week to make paychecks. You're in that exclusive club of billionaire owners. Okay? I find this hilarious at times where these guys say, well, sorry, we couldn't do this or we couldn't do that. You're telling me money wouldn't have fixed this problem? Seriously?
100%. Yeah.
It was our mission and we failed to achieve it. And for that, I'm genuinely sorry. You're not genuinely sorry. Billionaires are never sorry for the choices that they make. All they care about is the bottom line.
Yeah, no, it's completely, the letter and stuff like that. It was all a PR, if anything.
A stunt.
It was a stunt PR. That's what it really was. And I feel for the fans. I really feel for the overall community, because, like you mentioned, the Raiders already had to leave. They already had to leave that stadium, and now you have the A's after 57 years having to leave when theoretically they could have been extended a lot more. They could have obviously found a better situation, and now they have to be moved to Vegas in a couple of years, and they still don't have a stadium lease for whatever is coming up anytime soon too. So it's all tough. It really is, and whatever happens from here, I guess it's what it is. But that Fisher letter was just a PR stunt, slap in the face, pretty much at the end of the day.
The one last thing I'll say, because he also says, I hope I will see you again sporting the green and gold. Will it be green and gold? Will it be a brand change? Because they're technically not because they're not technically, they aren't in Oakland anymore.
Yeah, so, I mean, the only green that you're going to be seeing is essentially sell the team shirts. I think that's really what it's going to be, because I think that's what they've pretty much been wearing all season.
And the other problem you have with Vegas, and this problem like the Raiders are facing too, Vegas is a tourist city. Mm-hmm. It's not a destination city where fans can become enamored with a team. Like for you in Boston and me in New York, you have plenty of fans who are part of the fabric of the Red Sox or the Yankees or the Mets or the Dodgers or the Cubs, who've been around forever. Vegas is not a fan destination city. You're in and out. You're there to gamble. You're there to see shows. You're whatever. It's not a city to say, well, hey, what team do you root for? Oh, I root for the Vegas A's. Huh? What's that?
Mm.
Oh, well.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, people come from a lot of places to. It's not only just, you mentioned just Vegas itself, but just like the brand itself, name. Like, if you go to somebody in California and they're just like, who's your favorite baseball team? The New York Yankees. They're like, oh, okay, because that's obviously a big money type of brand. But if you go down, I don't know, in Florida, and in a couple of years, and you ask somebody, who's your favorite team? The Vegas A's, and you could be like, huh?
Some people are a few years ago, a few years from now, is going to say, wait, the Vegas A's, who are they?
Exactly. And I hate to cross sports, but like I think a lot of people when the Raiders left and a bunch of the Indians, of course, they changed their name. The Redskins, of course, they changed their name. It was all specifically just kind of getting used to, in which a lot of the teams that they changed it to, it doesn't. They didn't have to make it that way.
Yeah,
Right?
but the one difference I will say is the A's are doing this purposely. They're
Right.
changing.
Mhm.
The Guardians and the Commanders had to change their names
Because of
due
sure.
to political unrest.
Right.
But
Mhm.
but I understand the point you're making.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I think without further ado, that's obviously like we mentioned, the A's, of course, it's their last game. As a fan base there, and John Fisher, the A's fans, you deserve better, not John Fisher.
Did you also hear, I don't know if you saw the Bob Nightingale tweet, but that they basically have security on watch for
Yeah.
that last game? And I was like, "Wait, what?" And they're like, "Oh, they're afraid of like what happened in the Yankee game from many decades ago, where they ran on the field and like they take everything off the field." I don't know if you, I'm sure you've heard that story before, but
Yeah.
like, do you really want to keep stuff from this stadium? The stadium is gross.
Yeah. I don't know if I got the chance to, regardless of the memories and this and that for A's fans. With the stuff that's going on there, I don't know if I want to take anything away from there at this point in time.
Major League Baseball is going to take all the equipment stuff. You already know that, even though I don't
Mhm.
know if I really want that in Cooperstown, even though it has bad memories. But they're going to take the bases, they're going to take all the different stuff, and they're going to put it somewhere because they know how valuable it is, I guess. But
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely tough for A's fans, and like we mentioned, the sell team stuff and everything like that. At the end of the day, John Fisher shouldn't have said what he said. It was a stunt PR statement, and the fan base deserves better. So,
Would you say he is the worst owner in Major League Baseball right now?
yeah,
Okay, I think you and I are on the same page on that one.
yeah. I obviously have my grip and stuff. My own owner now, and John Henry, but he is definitely not as bad as him.
Yeah, but
Um,
you've had plenty of history
right.
early to mid 2000s to prove
Yeah.
that they have at least won, what was it, 4 titles and
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's more like he has essentially kind of used that history in terms of partly of like why he's not spending anymore. The Fisher specifically, he's essentially just using other things like taxes and crap for so many years and not really like putting in any effort into making this team even competitive, which of course is really unfortunate for A's fans. But now we're going to transit over, I think, to our next topic here, and that's going to be the White Sox. We've kind of talked about this throughout the overall regular season on the program countless times. I know Nick, you, and Tom have talked about it on your show before as well too. And that's the Chicago White Sox, and of course they are on the trajectory of having one of the worst seasons in baseball history. They're actually kind of fighting that right now. They've won the last couple of games, and they've actually had a decent amount of fans kind of come into their park to kind of
White
hopefully.
Sox Angels, by the way, two of the worst teams in Major League Baseball this year.
Yeah, and I think there was a tweet that I saw the other day too. How there's the White Sox, their last game, I think is going for $1. I said somebody posted that, and I'm just like, that's just so like we obviously just talked about the A's situation, of course, their fans like they shouldn't be showing up. I know you and Tom were talking about in terms of how the fans shouldn't just show up at this point in time,
They shouldn't.
and
It's a
I
disgrace.
100% agree. Yeah,
It's a slap in the face.
yeah, because and Ryan and I talked about this as well too. Is like even with like the really really bad teams that we have seen the last couple of years, I don't think I can recall a team that is completely from the start of the season in late March to essentially this point in time in September, them specifically just being so bad. Like they just like I think monthly specifically, like their average wins. I mean, right now they have 36 wins. So
38.
it's 38 now. Thank you. But I mean, if you essentially take that into account, you have less than 50 wins, even for like a really, really bad team.
That's
I mean,
crazy.
that is hard to comprehend. And I know that Chris Getz and a bunch of people they talked about in terms of like shedding payroll. I know kind of mid part of the season.
That makes
And
me laugh, by the way, when a team is so bad
yeah,
and a team regardless of the sport, you see a team that's so bad, and like, all right, we got to shed more payroll. What? Yeah, you actually need to spend, not shed.
Yeah, and I think that's like the last thing that, White Sox fans and others want to hear. Like, even like from the outside perspective, like we essentially just saw specifically one of the worst teams in Major League Baseball history. And now essentially you want to have your ownership pretty much tell your fan base of like, oh yeah, by the way, we can even have it worse. We can give you guys even worse potential product on the field, not just this year, but the next couple of years. And we're going to shed payroll.
Can I give you a number from perspective that just makes this whole thing laughable? So
Yeah, sure.
the White Sox are 53 and a half games out of first place. 53 and a half. Like, you can't even make that one up, like, if you tried.
No. And I think, granted, at this point in time, for like a lot of the teams are kind of competing and they're trying to get for the playoffs. They're just seeing the White Sox now, like on their schedule, and they're just like, oh, those are like free wins. And it's just like that should like never happen, Nick, ever in baseball. Like guaranteed specifically, I know at times like the White Sox have been able to, get some, wins kind of here down the stretch in the last couple of months. They've been obviously trying to compete and stuff like that, but like, yeah, it's just so hard to fathom just how much they've been so bad. And like, they obviously have some players. I think all in all, like I was just looking at overall kind of like their team stats. I think their best player has been Andrew Benintendi. And Andrew Benintendi, of course, was on my Red Sox for a while.
He's on the Yankees too.
He's on the Yankees. And no discredit to Andrew Benintendi, but like, you talk about like the stars in the league, right? And I love Andrew Benintendi to death, don't get me wrong. But if Andrew Benintendi is your star player for your certain team, I'm sorry, Benny, but you're not going to go deep. And essentially that you lost a lot of your overall talent. On the pitching standpoint, of course, you lost Dylan Cease, you lost Michael Kopech. You lost a ton of talent, and essentially it's almost just like, well, what do you
the
think?
Marlins.
Yeah, they're essentially the Marlins of the American League, and they're now trying to set payroll. So that tells me essentially too, like guys like Luis Rivera Jr., maybe Garrett Crochet, like the fact that they held on to these guys specifically in the second half is absolutely staggering, because I understand with Crochet, he wanted to obviously get an extension for the
Was
team.
he the one that caused the controversy, by the way, or whatever, that he wouldn't or refused to be traded or whatever because he wanted a contract?
Well, that was partly. I think a lot of teams were kind of looking for pitching. They were kind of looking at Garrett Crochet's services. I think for a while before the trade deadline, I think it was pretty much all guaranteed but certain.
But he basically refused to trade, which made no sense to me whatsoever.
But between in terms of like his injury problems in the past and of course just making those overall statements, I think you kind of saw some teams be like, I don't know about that then, because if he has a certain type of thing with his injury problem and, in terms of like, you can kind of see with the Grady Sizemore now with managing in the second half, they're kind of limited in his overall innings. He's only going like 4 innings now because
I kind of hope he gets the manager job, though. I hope they give him a chance to really.
For a team like that, I think they have to start, fresh for a lot of things. I think he definitely can give them something.
I mean, I'll give you another laughable stat. Chicago improved to 1-94 when trailing after 7 innings. 1-94,
and we're in the last weekend of the season. 1-94. Imagine telling your buddy that that your team came back from after 7 innings, 1 win of 162 games. I don't even know.
Yeah, 162. And I'll give you another one. They've won under 25% of their games this year. Think about that number.
Yeah.
Under 25%. You know how hard that is to do?
Yeah.
I mean, and by the way, Benintendi had an offer from the Yankees to stay.
Mm-hmm.
You think he's kicking himself now?
Well, I mean, he got paid one of the biggest contracts by them, so I think...
Okay, he got paid, but where is he?
He's not the worst team in baseball. Yeah, he's probably kicking himself, but I think at the end of the day, he's just like, as long as I don't know in terms about Benny, right, does he want to just still be with this overall shit show for the next couple of seasons?
He's going to get traded because of his contract at some point.
Yeah, I mean, he should. I mean, the guys that they actually have on their team, guys like Ben Attendee, guys like Garrett Crochet, guys like Luis Rivera Jr., even a guy like Andrew Vaughn, Gavin Sheets. Essentially, I'd say like 50% of their roster. Who knows if they're going to be back next year?
They're going to be the Marlins all over again. After the Marlins won the World Series in 2003.
Yep.
They basically were a sell-off franchise for forever. They didn't want to pay the White Sox. And Jerry Reinsdorf, by the way, is not a broke human being. He owns the Bulls. He owns the White Sox. Stop acting like you're cheap. Now, if I'm not mistaken, he's in his late 90s. He's not going to be around much longer, at least. But, like, act like you want this team to win, which, by the way, they're nowhere near winning at this point. But you were talking about Chris Getz, and Tom and I were talking about how much of a jerk he's acting in this situation. And there's a quote from him from September 16th, so about 10 days ago from this recording. He says, now if you would have told me prior to the year that we would have ended up with over 100 losses, 105, 110, I wouldn't have been as surprised. But this is the cards that we've been dealt at this point. So he's blaming ownership.
Yeah, that's a clear set of ownership. I mean, he's essentially given. I mean, should Chris Getz obviously get some blame, especially with the way that things are going with this overall worst team potentially in history? Of course. I think that everybody, the players, and this and that. But like you mentioned, if you have this amount of losses, and like we talked about, of like a lot of bad teams shouldn't even be to the point of this bad. Like you said, under 25%. They've had amount in terms of wins. A lot of the things that they are doing, Nick, is in terms of just how staggering it is. You just kind of take it into account. You kind of take a look at on the reverse of like a lot of the teams, take a look at my Red Sox, in 2018, an inverse essentially of this. They had one of the highest winning totals in the league. It didn't feel like, obviously you can talk about like the cheating stuff, this and that, but like they just didn't feel like they can lose. They were pretty much in cloud nine. This is basically the opposite of like, this team can't win. they were coming and come out, and it was only just not the way that they lost, Nick, but just like, some of the plays I saw a play yesterday or the night before, it was legitimately a pop-up, like between the pitching mound, the first base, the catcher, the shortstop. And legitimately, the pop-up was a can of corn for somebody to call off. It was like a play that you would essentially teach in like middle school.
You had time to camp under it. Yes.
Yeah, you had time to camp under it, and the ball essentially just dropped right in front of the pitcher. And
that happened a few times to them this year.
And yeah, and I'm just like, oh my God. You obviously had one of the plays too where it was a pop-up and you had the shortstop crashing into the left fielder. That was, of course, in Baltimore. Players essentially are checked out. They essentially are showing it out there on the field. It's just a mess. It's a complete disaster, and there's nothing else really that you can really describe about it.
Most people forget this because it's a microcosm of the season. The 28-game losing streak.
Yep.
I mean, holy cow, losing for a whole month?
Yeah. I don't yeah, almost 30 losses in a row. I mean, you would just think maybe even half of them, for any of the teams that you are playing, maybe an injury kind of goes down the other side. Maybe you just kind of catch fire just on one night. To go 28 losses in a row, I don't care who you are in this league, or you could be even like the worst team out there. This team essentially topped any type of worst categories possible into one full season. I don't think that I think specifically we're going to talk about this in like the next, 8 to 10 years and be like, remember this team, like from.
They're going to be a trivia question.
Exactly. Yeah, they're going to be a trivia question in the wrong worst of things possible. Be like, who was on a 20-game losing streak? Who
lost for a full month?
Yeah.
But I'll give you one more, and then we'll stop clowning on the White Sox. But
sorry, White Sox fans.
But so I'm looking at a timeline. I found an ESPN article where they break down the full White Sox season by months.
Yeah, I saw that too.
And so I come up on July 25th. So that's important because that's right around the trade deadline. That's right around the All-Star break. They were 27-77. They were 50 games under 500 before the trade deadline.
Wow.
And they didn't do anything.
And now where do they back in terms of games? You said like 50 or whatever back.
53.5.
So essentially, for two halves of baseball, they essentially pretty much microcosm both halves,
Yeah.
which is just extremely hard to do. It really is.
And I don't know if you remember, the White Sox actually made a deal with the Dodgers, and do you remember the pitcher in the bullpen when he got traded there? He's like, oh, like his head was down, he was hanging his head because he was on the Dodgers team that was going everywhere, and he got traded to the White Sox.
Why do I feel like I should know that pitcher's name? Maybe
But
I'll come back to the end of the show. I don't know.
Yeah, but I just felt bad for that Dodgers pitcher being traded to Chicago. It's like, oh crap! Like,
it wasn't it Miguel Vargas? It was
I think so.
Player. Yeah, because I remember a couple days after he got moved there was a picture of him in terms of like a solo shot after the game where he essentially was just by himself.
Yeah,
and I think he's just looking at himself in terms of like, bro, like I was on a team that could be definitely going to go
a World Series contender,
and now essentially I am stuck in this. You know what? So yeah, you just kind of have to feel for a lot of these type of guys because not only they, maybe he's getting more playing time and stuff, but if you're playing for arguably the worst team in baseball history, I'd rather be in the better situation 10 times out of 10 than what I'm in right now. So to really conclude everything, to me, Nick kind of went through certain types of things of like how bad this team has been, this and that. They're going to be breaking record. They're probably going to be breaking
in the wrong way.
In the wrong way too. Thank you. But they're going to be breaking one of the worst records, not only for their team history, but in Major League Baseball history and probably sports history. We can kind of take a look at it when it's all said and done.
Because the Mets will be happy finally that they don't hold that record anymore.
Yeah. They're going to be. Well, they're currently working on trying in the playoffs, and this team right now is working to. I mean, they essentially been wanting to try to go to Cancun for maybe about 3 months at this point.
I haven't heard that one in a while.
Yeah, so I mean, they definitely. I think their players are ready for a vacation. At least after even the trade deadline. And
you got to blow it up though. Like this is like. You got to destroy this, demolish it. It's like a building that's been up for 100 years, and it's time for it to go. It's over. Like see ya. Like, and you got to get rid of all the players. You got to fire Chris Getz and just start over from the ground up.
Yeah, so we'll see in terms of what happens from there. But now we're going to transit over to some of the best stuff that's coming our way, and that is the playoff picture. Because of course now this is the last weekend of the baseball season. This is Thursday, September 26th. But from the 27th to the 29th, that's going to officially conclude the regular season. And now, Nick, at this point in time, me and Ryan kind of talked about some of the teams from last week that have clinched. But essentially at this point in time, as of right now to this recording, we only have two teams left in terms of the New York Yankees and the Los Angeles Dodgers to officially clinch our postseason berth. So before we get into an overall predictions, I'm going to just get over your overall analysis. If any of these kind of teams kind of, surprise you from this point in time, but we have the Philadelphia Phillies who just clinched the NL East on Monday against the Chicago Cubs. They actually also yesterday, after their win against the Cubs, they actually won the last two games. They clinched the postseason bye. So they're essentially going to be playing in the NLDS. They're going to be playing the winner from the wild card series. The NL Central is already clinched already a while ago. That was by the Milwaukee Brewers. So congratulations to the Brewers. The NL West, that's currently still up there for grabs right now. The Padres are going to be definitely only be playing for the wild card at this point in time, as well as the Arizona Diamondbacks. But the Dodgers, unless it's going to take a monumental collapse, they're going to be representing the NL West for feels like the 50th millionth time. That doesn't really surprise me. So congratulations to the Dodgers. And then we're going to transit over to the American League side. Nick, your New York Yankees are 1 win away from winning the AL East. Of course, you guys are facing the Baltimore Orioles this week in a massive playoff implications type series. The Orioles have won the first two games and pretty much have hold on to the champagne for the New York celebration at their ballpark. So we will see about tonight. We got a very good pitching matchup between Corbin Burnes and Garrett Cole. That's just obviously a great overall matchup to conclude a big overall series, especially if you want to obviously clinch to get the AL East. You don't want anybody else but your ace to go out there on the mound and try to get this job done. So you don't really have to worry about this overall weekend really meaning much in terms of trying to get stuff done at this point in time. And that they're going to be facing the Pittsburgh Pirates this weekend. And the Orioles, I'm not sure specifically who they're going to be playing this weekend, but they already clinched a playoff berth. Both the Yankees and the Orioles both have clinched a playoff berth already. It's now just going to come down to who takes the East. And like I mentioned to you off the air before, unless there's a monumental collapse that's happening, the Yankees only need one more win, and more likely than not, I'm not going to jinx anything at this point in time, but I think it would be a massive shocker, I think, to everybody if they don't take the East.
So they're playing the Twins at the Twins.
Okay. So, I mean, right now for the Twins, they obviously, we're gonna kind of talk about some teams that kind of been falling around as well. They're actually one of them. But, yeah, I mean, going to the AL Central. Now, this is obviously going to be a really interesting division. Brian actually kind of previewed in terms of the season kind of how bad this overall division would be. And kind of like, all right, I guess this Sun-Soup team has to win it. But this has been one of the more interesting type of team, divisions, especially like the teams that we have with of course, the rise of the Tigers. Brian and I obviously talked about that last week. It doesn't feel like they can't even lose right now. They essentially they won their series.
Shocking.
They won their series against the Orioles. They had a sellout the last couple of games here against the Rays. They're just essentially just feeling like they give me the vibe of the Arizona Diamondbacks actually from last year. But we'll talk about the overall kind of predictions and stuff in a little bit. But congratulations to the Cleveland Guardians. They are the AL Central champs. And I believe as well, too, Nick, they have a bye as well. So they're going to be playing for the American League DS. And then the AL West, that was clinched by who else but the inevitable, the Houston Astros. Of course, if you want to thank the Seattle Mariners for another collapse.
Oh, my God. What a collapse by Seattle.
They were up 10 games, if I can recall, I believe, right around the trade deadline. And the second half, they completely went to
in the toilet.
And that team specifically from Houston that, is essentially, I think at this point in time, are the boogeyman to a lot of the league. They are just like, well, we are inevitable. And they win the division once again, and they're going to be representing the American League West. So that is the Houston Astros. Congratulations to them, whether people like it or not. So that is that. And now we're going to talk quickly about the wild card. Of course, there's a ton of teams right now from both sides. So, of course, Nick, we obviously talked about the Mets and the Braves earlier, obviously, in the program. They're going to be trying to fight for a wild card spot. Just kind of looking really quickly here on my Yahoo Sports app. The NL wild cards, so the top team right now in the wild card is the San Diego Padres. They're up 3.5 games up from the 2 spot and the 3 spot. The Diamondbacks are in the 2 spot right now with 88 wins and 71 losses. And then the Mets are in the 3rd wild card spot, but they're only 1 game up on the Atlanta Braves. So there's still a ton of work to be done in the wild card mix for the.
And that's why those games are important, the rescheduling of the games, because say they lose both games in Atlanta, they're out.
Yep.
They're probably out.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. Now, in the American League wildcard spot, the Baltimore Orioles, they're definitely going to be the top spot on the wildcard, to say the least, unless you get your Yankees, Nick, completely fall apart at this point in time, like 4 games left. I guarantee you guys are definitely going to at least win 1. Like I mentioned, I'd be stunned. But they're 4 games up. They're going to definitely take that top spot. And then the Tigers, Nick, unless something monumentally collapses, the Tigers are going to be a playoff team. They're going to be making it. They're going to be playing actually the team we just talked about right before this. If that's the Chicago White Sox, they should get a couple wins from there. So congrats to the Tigers, because they were 10 games, I believe, under. They were completely falling apart.
They were a dead duck middle of the season.
They were a dead duck. They traded one of the best pitchers in Jack Flair at the trade deadline, and the second half, they just have gone on an insanity run. I think the problem they're going to run into is they're just not going to have enough to compete. But I'm happy for them that they made the playoffs, though. Right. This is just kind of a team where just like you had no expectations about to even having a chance to be there. It's just the fact that they're even in this overall spot. Even if they get their doors blown off, I don't think they're going to take a look and be like, well, no, that was a bad overall postseason by the Tigers, because it's just like, they were out of it. They were a dead duck, and the fact they even got to this point, I think they were way more than 10 games under at one point.
But you were saying this before. Could this be D-backs 2.0 with the Tigers?
I mean, they have an ace, definitely for sure, one of the best pitchers in baseball, and that's Tarek Skubal. He's an absolute dog. And they have a couple other guys behind him that have been, decent. And their lineup isn't really much to have home run about, but they have some guys. And like you mentioned, I think you're going to be right about this. I mean, they might have to face the Houston Astros in the playoffs, and I don't think that's going to go well for them at all.
They're going to get dogged big time.
You have a team with a ton of postseason experience against a team specifically that is very young. And partly, too, I know obviously a lot of the teams that kind of ride high into the playoffs, it's a good thing, but then you have just a couple bad games, and that's that. So we'll have to see about that. But right now the Tigers are on the 2 spot. The Kansas City Royals are in that 3rd spot. Now,
well, actually, technically, right now at this current moment, they're tied. They're the same record. So
okay, yeah. They're tied for the 2 and the 3 spot. But as of right now, Nick, I mean, the Minnesota Twins have a massive fallout. In the second half,
they shocked me too.
Yeah, they have 4 games. They have one today, and they have the Orioles this weekend. So of course, the Twins are trying to play for something at this point in time. The Seattle Mariners are 2.5 games out. I think it's a very long shot for them. And of course, my Red Sox just got eliminated last night from any type of glimmer of slimmer, I guess, of any type of.
I mean, as bad as they started, for them to be 500, I think is kind of incredible to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because they were awful at the beginning of the year. Like, I think they were 10 or 15 games under at one point.
Who was that?
The Red Sox.
Oh, no, the Red Sox actually had a pretty good first half, all things considered. It was really their second half that pretty much did them in because their pitching, they didn't have enough pitching. A lot of the guys that they were essentially pitching with, those starters, they overworked their innings. And pretty much ever since the Dodgers series, the first series right out of the gate, they just kind of went downhill from there. But I think all in all with the team itself, because, I mean, at this point in time, might as well talk about, my Sox really quickly, is – yes, it sucks that they're pretty much going to be not making the playoffs once again. But I think when you look at it, the hope is to at least finish over 500. They were under 500 the last 2 seasons. They're not going to be in last place. Thank God. That was one of my things that I didn't want to see again. So I think all in all, I think it was an improvement from the last 2 seasons. But it's also a thing of where it's not enough. Like, they need to specifically kind of make that next step. And we've talked about a couple teams that have been cheaping out, whether it's been the White Sox or the A's. The Red Sox have to start going back to their old ways of spending, getting some big-time pitching, keeping some of their star talent because they were right there. Despite specifically, whether, they were going to be a team or not, a lot of these teams between the Twins and the Mariners and the Royals, they were awful in this overall last month. And the Red Sox should have been able to take advantage of that. But instead, they decided to go on the downswing, and it pretty much kind of bit them in the ass. But I also can take a look and be like, all in all, it was, they're pretty much as is. There's a 500 type of team. They're probably going to finish about it as well. And it's disappointing. Don't get me wrong, but I do think there's going to be a lot of building blocks for sure down the road.
You mentioned Tyler O'Neill, right? I thought I saw that in one of your tweets that they really need to sign him back. You were saying, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, Breslow and company, they really want to hopefully get more balance. He actually talked about that this morning on Boston WEI show. They need to get more balance, and they need to start acquiring some big frontline pitching. And I'm not obviously going to say just yet that, because obviously we're starting to roll all the time here. They need to just get a lot of stuff. They need to start kind of figuring out their overall situation. They have a ton of log jams in the infield and the outfield. So that's pretty much the Red Sox right now. All right, so but in terms of the playoff picture, like we mentioned, we pretty much went through the overall who won the divisions and the wild card. And now, Nick, really quick, we're going to get into really quickly our postseason predictions because, I mean, at this point in time, if we just kind of want to take a look at just an overall early prediction standpoint, in the National League Championship and the ALCS, if you want to just kind of make an overall judgment of where you think at this point in time after the regular season is going to be coming to an end, who do you think is going to be facing off in the American League Championship Series and in the NL Championship Series?
Okay, So, excuse me, Baltimore's kind of been a little bit on the downswing, even though they've beat the Yankees the last couple. Their pitching is a little bit of a mess right now. Offense, not a problem. They'll figure it out. Kansas City, I don't really know much about Kansas City currently, except for Bobby Witt, who is going to be an amazing player for many years to come on that franchise. Casey's kind of a wild card to me, not in the sense of a wild card, just a wild card. We have no idea what to expect out of them. I'd like to say Baltimore wins this series just because of experience sake, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I think the two teams are going to run into the Yankees anyway. I think the Yankees are a better team just off the bat there. So I think the Yankees are going to end up winning against either of those teams to begin with. So I don't know if it really matters, but I'll say just out of pure experience, I think Baltimore wins that wild card game, but I think the Yankees are going to beat Baltimore in the DS.
Okay. I definitely see that for sure. I think you mentioned the Royals. They have really good pitching. Killer Reagans, Seth Lugo. They've had some really good years. Michael Walk, obviously. But I just worry about, they give me the Cleveland Guardians vibe in the past, in which I don't know if they're going to have enough at the end of the day. They're
good. They have good regular season, but they can't transform it into the playoffs.
Exactly, yeah. And that's specifically when it comes to the postseason, you need to have the experience. You need to have some guys in the postseason experience. Right now, for me in the American League Championship Series, I think it's going to come down to two teams that we've seen in the past for many years in the past. It's kind of the old cliche, but it's going to be, I think, the Yankees and the Houston Astros. And I think that would be obviously great for baseball because we kind of already seen this in the past, but now you bring Juan Soto into it with Aaron Judge. And, of course, you have, the Astros, obviously, kind of the team that's been kind of their kryptonite for many, many seasons. And now specifically for the Yankees, they're trying to get over that hump of, the Astros pretty much kicking themselves out from 2017 and from 2 seasons, I think 2-3 seasons ago. If not, it feels like, a couple times. But, I just have that. And then the NLCS, I know that the Dodgers obviously have had their perks of kind of falling up ship early, but I think Ohtani is definitely going to help them a lot. And the Phillies, I think it's going to be Dodgers and Phillies. Two teams specifically, I think, could be really, really good at the end of the day. The Phillies, I think, just have a lot of great pitching. The Dodgers, I don't know, have enough pitching, but I think that they're going to have an offense that can definitely kind of take them down the road. I do think with the Diamondbacks, they kind of fall a little bit short early, a lot more than I think people expect them to. I think that this postseason, Nick, I don't know if you can agree with me or not, but I think that, we kind of talked in the last couple of years, kind of the underdog type team kind of going a lot deeper. I think that this year it's going to be kind of more of the postseason that we kind of know and love in terms of like the teams that we kind of can see are going to be moving on. The big dogs, exactly. I think that there's so much specific that you pretty much, like a team like the Tigers, like we talked about how they could be potentially the this year's Arizona Diamondbacks. But when essentially that you're riding kind of that wave from all the way from the early part of September until October, as great as it is, you need to essentially have the energy then for another good 4 or 5 weeks if you want to get to specifically where you want to be. And I just don't know if the Tigers have that in them. For a young team like that, for the roster that they have, I think it's been obviously a great overall run, but I think they're just going to be falling up short, whether it's to a team like Baltimore or whether it's to a team like Houston, because they just have Houston has the experience, but Baltimore specifically just has the better overall talent.
Well, currently as the standings show, they would play Houston. So Detroit's going to get mauled by Houston if that's the case. On the National League side, you were saying, I think Arizona might beat Milwaukee because Milwaukee just doesn't win playoff series at all.
And they already beat them last year, too. It would be a rematch, actually, from last year.
So from track record alone, Milwaukee does not win playoff games. Or they win playoff games, they don't win the series. So and don't get me wrong, Milwaukee had an amazing year. Like, they had won the division, like, they had it sewn up early. But, I mean, I don't know if Arizona is as good as last year, or they were underdog and they managed to build it up. But I think Arizona wins that series. On the Padres-Mets side, I feel like San Diego has more stars on it. And I just think eventually San Diego will pull that out. And the Mets will go into the darkness again with all that money and that high tax bill they have to pay.
The biggest thing right now with the Mets is Francisco Lindor going to be able to play in the playoffs?
That's huge.
And he's essentially been their backbone for most of the season. If he is not there, I obviously know that they've kind of relied on some guys like Brandon Nimmo and Starlin Marte and Francisco Alvarez. But Francisco Lindor is their guy right now. Pete Alonso obviously has had a very tough year in his walk year, and he's definitely feeling the pressure of it. But watching that game when I was there on Sunday, I was at the Phillies Mets game on Sunday. They're hoping to have a game played in postseason play because it felt like a postseason game when I was there on Sunday. And I think for Met fans, they're just really hoping that this Braves series that they have on Monday, is meaningful. And like you mentioned with the Padres, they're obviously just the better team. So
the Mets, if they lose the games in Atlanta and they get eliminated, it's going to be a terrible time in Mets land. I'm just telling you that right now. Like, I think Pete Alonso will end up walking after that if they miss.
Yeah.
If they essentially swing and miss and just completely get destroyed.
Yep.
And let's say they make, because hopefully they make the postseason, they make the wild card. If they lose, it's going to be bad too. Mets fans are going to scream and yell. And then you're going to see him walk away from Pete Alonso, and then you're going to go down the tubes. Yep. So, I don't know. But so I think San Diego moves on. That's actually a fair matchup, in my opinion. Like, people are going to say, oh, the Dodgers are the 1 seed. They have Shohei. They have Freddie Freeman. They got Yamamoto back off the IL, even though he hasn't pitched all year. I would say the San Diego pitching is better than the Dodger pitching. To be fair,
yeah, right now because the Dodger pitching is very injury
questionable.
At this point in time, it's questionable. So I mean, obviously those teams are playing each other right now, and pretty much the games that they've been both playing in, they've been close. So I think that if it came down to it, it'd be a really fun overall series. But at this point in time, folks, we are running out of time. But we just want to thank everybody for joining us on Hitting for the Cycle. Make sure, as always, to just follow us on our social media platforms on Hitting for the Cycle and Empty the Bench Sports Network. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and to follow Ryan on his overall Twitter platform, as well as youtube.com/UTB Network, as well as my Twitter platform. All of our platforms are on the Ticker platform as well, too. You could also follow Nick on his socials as well, too. So we all have it over there. But Nick, anything else we want to talk about quickly before we conclude today's show at this point in time?
No. I mean, I'm looking forward to the playoff stretch. Playoff baseball is fun to watch, even though people have really been down on baseball lately. But no, playoff baseball is fun to watch. Hopefully New York, the Yankees and the Mets make a run. Hopefully the Yankees get past ALCS and actually compete for a World Series title. Hopefully this year, first time since 2009. But we'll see what happens. But no, I'm looking forward to the playoffs.
All right, so we want to thank you for taking Ryan's spot for this week. And without further ado, this is Ben Kruse with Nick Morgasen. Sign off for you guys. Thank you guys for watching Hitting for the Cycle on Empty the Bench Network. We'll hopefully to be back next week for our postseason special, at least to start off the program. So we'll see you guys then, and have a good one.
See you next week.